Welcome, I'm Bill Haney. Let's have a conversation. This is our first episode of Conversations brought to you by video conferencing. It probably won't be the last. We will use video conferencing as long as necessary to continue to practice physical distancing without turning that into isolation from our families and friends and organizations that are important to us. One of those organizations that is very important to us and perhaps is not recognized as much as it deserves to be is the North Oakland Headwaters Land Conservancy. We'll probably refer to that organization as just the Conservancy or NOHLC as we go along. And one of my favorite folks is with us today as our guest, and that's the Associate Executive Director of the Conservancy, Shannon Steele. That organization makes contributions that enrich us all in many ways, as well as future generations. They do that by preserving and protecting our fragile natural places. Shannon works with Sue Julian, who's the executive director and has an illustrious career of service to many causes, of which one is NOHLC. She's been involved in that for 18 years. In many capacities, she's been the past president. And Sue has done a marvelous job. She's been one of our guests along with Shannon at the Backyard Birders Club of the Clarkston area, and which has also grown and benefited from the relationship with NOHLC. We've been their guests to some of their fragile areas that they've preserved, and including, and Shannon can correct me on this, to protect the power chic skitterling butterfly. And I probably botched that up pretty good, but she can correct me.
No, that was close.
Did I do it? Okay.
Almost. Power chic skipperling. We'll talk about that later.
Okay. And Shannon has been a member of that team at NOHLC since 2015. And Shannon, you've been passionate about the outdoors, the natural world for as long as you can remember. I recall that from our past conversations. Shannon did her undergraduate work at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And she acquired GIS skills. That means Geographic Information System. So you can tell us a little bit about that along the way and about the work that she does there. But first, Shannon, tell us a bit more about NOHLC.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, Bill. First of all, this is really great, and we're adapting during these times, aren't we? It's great that we can still have one of your episodes. And well, the North Oakland Headwaters Land Conservancy has over 1,500 acres of protected lands, and that includes both conservation easements as well as fee properties. And in my previous conversation with you, we did talk about the difference between those, but just to give a brief overview, conservation easements are a voluntary agreement between a landowner and a land trust or government entity. And basically what that entails is the landowner still owns the property that is being enveloped by a conservation easement, but the development rights on that specific area of conservation easement are under certain restrictions in order to maintain the conservation values of that land. So basically the development rights of that area of land become under ownership of the land trust. Our fee properties we own outright, just as anyone would own a piece of property. So the combination of those two forms of ownership that we have over 1,500 acres of land that spans 6 townships in Oakland County, and we also have 1 preserve in Genesee County as well.
Terrific. Well, you touched on the geographic area.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us more about the headwaters of which rivers are involved.
Yes, that's a great question. So one reason that we have the word headwaters in our name is because the properties that we protect actually encompass 4 headwaters areas. And headwaters basically means, you know, the water source, the origin of a river. So we actually protect land in the headwaters of the Flint, Clinton, Shiawassee, and Huron rivers. And the importance behind that is when we're protecting the source water of a river, we are ensuring as best we can that downstream ecological quality and health of that watershed is maintained.
So it's not just our pretty special area here. I mean, a point where we got 4 rivers,
yes,
but also extending many, many, many miles downstream, that impacts those geographic areas as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, I know I lived in Ann Arbor area for a number of years, and the Huron River is important there. And then in Troy, Rochester area, where we have yet another river in that direction. But we're at the nexus of 4, and that's got to be a little bit unusual.
That is, Bill, that is unusual. Basically, the topology in this area, in this corner of Oakland, of Northwest Oakland County, is such that you have these 4 divergent watersheds, which means that water is flowing in 4 different directions from this general area, which is definitely a hydrological, geological, geographical rarity, which is one thing that makes the North Oakland Headwaters Land Conservancy's protection area so rare and so much more important.
And that impacts the fauna and the flora, virtually every living thing in this area. I know that the bird population and the variety of species that we have, it varies greatly just within a few miles here, as some of the birds prefer one kind of habitat and one kind of food that's available to them. And it's amazing. I know that I'm in North Oakland County, very close to the edge of Genesee and Lapeer. And Clarkston, which is a dozen miles south of me, gets birds and gets them at different times. And I'm sure that the flow of the water and then the plants that are found nearby the water's edge, that must contribute to this variety. Is that correct, or is it just a guess on my part?
No, it's certainly correct. And you know what? The headwaters areas of watersheds and of rivers tend to be the most biologically diverse areas, just because part of it has to do with the fact that you have certain plant species that you wouldn't see elsewhere in a watershed that are going to attract certain types of wildlife. So, and you also have a lot of certain areas where there are breeding activities that certain species are able to do, specifically in the headwaters areas of a watershed. So those are some of the features that create this biological diversity that we're lucky to have in this area specifically.
Well, one of those special areas is in Davisburg, the Overlook area, where Sue, your colleague, kindly led an expedition members from the Clarkston Area Backyard Birders Club a while back, where that butterfly was then, I seem to recall, down to not single digit, but double digit numbers. Is that one of the kind of sensitive areas we're talking about where a creature is found there and no place else?
Most definitely. So you're exactly right, Bill. In the Davisburg area, we have some very rare ecological areas called a prairie fen. Prairie fens are a rare wetland type that are home to certain species that you wouldn't find elsewhere. They're breeding sites of certain species that you wouldn't find elsewhere. And one of those species that you're talking about is the Poweshiek skipperling butterfly. It relies on this prairie fen habitat, which has been threatened by all sorts of activities, including development. And in Davisburg specifically, there is still a beautiful, intact prairie fen area, part of which has already been protected, another portion of which we, as the local conservancy of this area, are working to protect even further to make sure that we have the most encompassed protection of this entire prairie fen that we possibly can have. Because you're right, the most recent survey of the Poweshiek skipperling butterfly told us that we are estimating fewer than 100 of these butterflies left in the wild. So one of the most important things that we can do right now, besides breeding these little butterflies in the Minnesota Zoo, which they are doing, is to protect their natural habitat. Because a wetland as complex as a prairie fen, we just cannot make that. We cannot make a man-made prairie fen wetland that is going to properly serve these very sensitive species and function the way that it would in the wild. I mean, it took, I don't know how long in geological history to create these prairie fens.
Wow. You know, the conservancies have protected enormous areas of land throughout the country. I seem to recall that it's some 55 to 60 million acres, which is twice as much as is in the national park system. So is that correct, or my memory failing me?
I'm actually not up to date on those specific numbers. I know we've talked about that in the past, but I can say for sure that what is correct is that land conservancies have become increasingly important, substantially important, as a response to some of the federal land protection rates that we just see slowing down a bit.
Right. Yeah, substantially, really. I think it was Theodore Roosevelt who was the prime leader in creating the park system. And without that, of course, many species, more species than we've already lost would be lost. But the land conservancies have done a magnificent job in protecting and preserving these places. But I wonder if the population, if voters and citizens are being more forthcoming in supporting the work of the conservancies. What about specifically NOHLC? Are you seeing cooperation from landowners and from local citizens?
We definitely are. We definitely are seeing people coming together in our community to support our work, to support their local land protection entity. We don't actually have, a formal millage per se. I'm citing Ann Arbor here for a moment. Some of their nonprofits that do environmental work actually get, a formal protection through a millage. They get formal support through a millage. And we don't have anything like that up in this area where we protect land. However, we get incredible support through individual donations, foundations in the area, in order to continue our land protection efforts. And we also have some people who really, really help us spread the word. They come out and they do volunteer work with us. They do volunteer inspections on our properties, which we have to do annually to make sure that there are nothing that needs to be taken care of on the property, such as trash dumping or something. And we have people coming out to help us with stewarding our properties as volunteers. So we really do have an incredible, incredible support system here, which is one of the things that I love most about working for NOHLC. But, of course, just like any cause, we always have a ways to go, right? We always have to remind ourselves to be aware of important issues in our area and to be mindful of them and to be supportive of them.
Well, virtually all organizations have been seriously impacted by the restrictions that are in place, and properly so, because of the coronavirus. And many have had to cancel their primary fundraising activities. I know I went to yours a year or two ago in the fall, which was one of your major sources of revenue, as I recall, an important one anyhow. And many of the organizations I'm involved with have had to do the same thing. So are there steps that you are taking or have taken or are going to take to compensate for the loss of revenue from any of these activities where many people have gathered together? That's part of the fun of it, is meeting with other folks and talking with them. But with the new requirements, continued requirements for social distancing, that's going to be tough. So what's been the impact on you?
Yeah, so that definitely has been one very difficult thing for nonprofits to deal with right now. Just like businesses in our area being impacted financially, so are our nonprofits. And you're exactly right, Bill. One of those reasons is because we've had to cancel, of course, our in-person events. We did cancel our Wild Night In dinner event, which would have been on May 15th. But of course, for safety reasons, we canceled that. And the gala that you were referring to, our Wild Night Out gala, which takes place in October every year, we are already preparing for ways that we can proceed with having that event, but how can we do it safely? How can we still do it successfully, right? Because it is one of our biggest fundraisers in any given year. So we are looking into all sorts of virtual options for that event. And as it's a little ways out, so we're thinking, okay, do we go completely virtual with that? Do we go partially virtual? What are the restrictions going to look like then? What will the CDC's recommendations be then? So we are making some plans for our events, but in light of having to cancel some of our more recent events that would have taken place in the spring, and having fewer donations than we would normally be getting, because this is a financially difficult time for everyone. This past Tuesday on May 5th was Giving Tuesday Now, and that was a global effort, a global response to the financial impacts on nonprofits and to the impact on certain nonprofits that are in high demand, trying to help alleviate COVID-related needs, but also to those nonprofits like us that we are not directly related to COVID issues, but we are being impacted financially by this. And that day we really saw our community come together. We held an online campaign, an online fundraiser, and we ended up raising $4,000 in 5 days for Giving Tuesday now. And I was just blown away with those, with that support and with some of the comments and writing that we were getting from donors, words of encouragement. It was really, really amazing. So we've been hanging in there, and we've been trying to be as adaptive as we can and trying to go virtual on many things that we have not gone virtual with in the past. So that's what we're looking at right now, but we've seen our community adapt with alongside us.
Well, you've got a lot of creative people over there, and one of the very few positive outcomes from the condition we're going through now with the coronavirus is that people are being entrepreneurial and experimental and trying new ways to be effective and to achieve the objectives and the missions of their organizations. And so that makes me wonder whether you are, if you're not, quotes, open for business in the traditional sense, whether people can still contribute either financially or volunteer effort. So where are you on that? Are people able to be in touch with you and to volunteer their services or their contributions?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we are still doing some virtual volunteer work as we are able to. Of course, with our office not being open right now, that is a little bit difficult. But on Giving Tuesday now, for example, we had people on their Facebooks sharing our mission, sharing our information with their friends, with their family, helping to spread the word about why we should support our land protection entity in this area. I am still leaving our fundraiser for Giving Tuesday now open for a couple more weeks. We're still amazingly seeing contributions come in through that, and we have that also up on our website, and I'm so thankful for that. But in terms of our other great volunteers, we have an incredible volunteer board, and we are still holding our board meetings every month virtually through Zoom. And those are, of course, open to the public. People can attend those meetings with us virtually as well. And I have a great team of volunteers who are helping me prepare for our Wild Night Out October event, which again, we're looking at virtual options for. That's a great team of volunteers that I have who meet with me on Zoom every month. I'm always happy to welcome more people to that event team. If anyone is interested in event planning and has any thoughts on virtual possibilities for an event, I would love to hear them. So we have a number of virtual volunteer opportunities. Another great thing, Bill, that we'll probably talk about a little later is some of our preserves that are open to the public. We've seen so many people coming out and walking on our preserves, and another great way to just even spread the word about your local conservancy is to take a walk out there, take a picture of yourself, put it on your Facebook, on your social media, or just keep it for yourself. We don't have to always be linked to our social media. But if you can, share that picture with others and let them know where you were and how special it was and how it hopefully gave you a little bit of peace of mind in that moment. That's another great way to support the Conservancy is by, visiting our properties and sharing those special locations of where our public preserves are with other people.
That's fascinating, and it reminds me of a point that I wanted to mention and didn't, is that while we in this current generation, citizens now in this area are benefiting from the work of the Conservancy and like organizations, one of the great values for me is for the future generation. I've taken my grandkids to a number of these places that wouldn't exist. They'd be gone now if it were not for the work of the Conservancy and others. And you can't put a price on that. Anybody with grandchildren or a concern about what we leave behind has got to appreciate the efforts, the contributions, the labors of organizations like NOHLC. And so I would encourage our viewers to look into it further. And perhaps some of the places that you already most enjoy are ones that benefited from the stewardship of NOHLC and people like Sue Julian and Shannon Steele and their colleagues. Shannon, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to do our inaugural video conference of Conversations with Bill. Great to see you again. And I hope that our viewers will tune in to the next video conference of this program. But I enjoyed this episode, Shannon, so thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having us, Bill. And I hope that you stay safe, you stay well, and everyone else viewing this also. Well wishes to all.
Thank you, Shannon. And thank you to our producers and directors for this conversation with Bill. And we look forward to seeing you for the next one.